The Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to identify gaps in pursuing a more holistic approach to countering the Chinese Communist Party. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. I'd like to first say that one of our colleagues, Joaquin Castro, is at MD Anderson, that got diagnosed with cancer, and let's offer our thoughts and prayers to him and for speedy recovery. And if you can reach out to him personally, that would be awesome. And anyway, our prayers are with him. There's no doubt that the growing aggression of the Chinese Communist Party poses a generational threat to the United States. From using a spy balloon to surveil some of America's most sensitive military sites, to their theft of upwards of $600 billion of American IP every year, much of which goes into their military, to their continued military aggression and expansion in the Indo-Pacific. And now CIA Director Burns has recently stated U.S. intelligence has reason to believe China is considering sending weapons, lethal weapons, to Russia. All this ahead of the upcoming meeting between Chairman Xi and Putin next week, where they will surely strengthen their unholy alliance. We are living through one of the most dangerous periods in American foreign policy in a generation. It is a struggle for the global balance of power, and the primary battleground is technology leadership. This is an issue Congress and this administration cannot ignore. I commended the administration for their recent export control rules on semiconductors and semiconductor equipment, and I look forward to hearing the details about your work with the Dutch and the Japanese to harmonize these controls. But I am concerned the administration's efforts aren't as all-encompassing as they should be. Congress authorized the Bureau of Industry and Security with expansive powers to stop the transfer of dual-use technology that the CCP is using to build their military. Yet overwhelmingly, BIS continues to grant licenses that allow critical U.S. technology to be sold to our adversaries, even those it's designed designated as threats to national security. In just one recent 6-month time period, BIS approved licenses worth $60 billion to Huawei and $40 billion to SMIC, their semiconductor company. Both of these companies are military companies for the CCP, and both are listed on the entities list. If BIS continues to mindlessly greenlight sensitive technology sales, the CCP has proven they will use our own inventions against us. Look no further than the recent spy balloon that the administration allowed to fly across much of the continental United States. It has been reported Western-made components were found in this balloon. That is on top of the recent hypersonic missile test, which circled the globe and landed with precision. This was only possible through U.S. technology that was sold to them. This should be a wake-up call to all Americans. I stand ready to work with the administration and with the Democrats on this panel to strengthen our export control systems where needed, and why I launched a 90-day review of BIS. We are also falling behind on the ideological battlefield. Congress appropriated $325 million to the State Department to counter CCP's malign influence around the world. But instead, that money was used to fund bakeries in Tunisia, electric vehicle charging stations in Vietnam. And at the same time, the CCP continues to invest large amounts of money in developing countries, building bridges, roads, ports, and energy infrastructure, all the while growing their influence over the people in these developing nations. Both U.S. aid and the Development Finance Corporation play key roles in developing lasting partnerships and long-term development and trade with other countries. Every day, we should make sure people around the world know that our aid is not the debt trap diplomacy that the CCP uses to exploit developing countries. But we are not succeeding. Of the 6.3 billion people living in developing countries, about 70% have a positive view of both China and Russia. 70%. All the while, the threat against Taiwan grows every day, yet arms sales to Taiwan, those that the ranking member and I signed off on nearly 4 years ago, have yet to be delivered, despite the administration admitting Taiwan is facing an imminent threat from the CCP. We must strengthen Taiwan's defenses through weapons and training. We will not tolerate any attempts to delay notification to Congress of arms sales to Taiwan. But it's not too late to reverse this trend. As the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, it is my priority to make sure Congress and this administration are working together in a bipartisan fashion to confront this generational threat. That starts with ensuring that we are using the tools we have on the books, like export controls, to constrain the CCP's military and surveillance systems. And I stand ready to work with the administration and those on the other side of the aisle to strengthen our export control systems where needed. We need tough diplomacy and real actions to keep critical technologies and manufacturing capabilities out of the grip of our adversaries. So I look forward to hearing from each of you what you are doing to address the China challenge and what steps you're taking to dramatically shift your agency's priorities to meet this challenge head on. From what I've seen over the last 2 years, much more is needed. It is time we move beyond the false belief that the CCP will ever deal in good faith. Time and again, they do not stand behind their commitments. The CCP is acting in their own interest, and it's time that we start protecting ours. And with that, the chair now recognizes the ranking member, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, for any statements he may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And while I do not, first let me just say also in regards to our colleague, Mr. Castro, who has all of our prayers. We've got and have talked to a number of members of his staff, and they have told us that the surgery has been very successful, that Mr. Castro is hoping to be back after the next recess that we have. He will be home shortly, recuperating. And so to him, I want to make sure that everyone knows that every member of this committee is he's in our hearts, our thoughts, and our prayers as he recovers. First, the aggregate data regarding license approvals and denials provides no information about the transactions that took place. To use them to conclude that problematic transactions are taking place is both wrong and I believe disingenuous. Second, our export administration regulations are published publicly and spell out exactly which items and technologies are not allowed to be exported to specific entities on the entity list. Companies generally do not apply for a license when they know it would be denied. So it should be no surprise that we see far more approvals than denials. The current entity list and licensing process gives the administration tremendous visibility into what goods and services are being legally exported. One would think we would want that. An interagency review process consisting of BIS, the State Department, Department of Defense, and the Department of Energy reviews these licenses. The public debate on the issue should be done with this important context in mind. Now, the PRC and its policies clearly present the greatest geopolitical challenge that the United States faces today. And I want to thank Chairman McCall for making this the very first hearing on the 118th Congress. And I thank all the witnesses here today for your service and for appearing before this committee. And since this is our very first hearing, this Congress, I want to remind everyone what this committee is all about. The House Foreign Affairs Committee must be at the forefront of positioning the United States for success in the strategic competition with China, as this is the only committee that is focused on diplomacy. Other committees have jurisdiction over military, over our domestic institutions, over financial systems, and so on. Our job on this committee is to make sure that the State Department, USAID, the Development Finance Corporation, the Bureau of Industry and Security have the tools and resources they require to effectively compete with the People's Republic of China. So what does effective competition look like? An effective China strategy is one that invests in the leverages our strengths, and one which does not exaggerate the threats we face. A smart strategy is not simply about responding to Chinese actions or provocations. It is one where the United States leads by representing a positive agenda and a vision for the rest of the world. If we're simply in the countering China business, we're not living up to our responsibilities to the American people. First and foremost, we must complete and compete diplomatically. Our alliances and partnerships are our superpower and something Beijing cannot replicate. Instead of taking unilateral steps that will be less effective and alienate us from our allies and partners, we must focus on working collectively to isolate Beijing. Our generals are constantly telling me that the State Department helps make their jobs much easier. So, I hope this committee will pass a bipartisan state authorization bill and work to ensure that we adequately staff and resource our Indo-Pacific strategy. Second, we must show up diplomatically and stand up vigorously for our interests. We need to work with our allies and partners and in multilateral institutions to advance U.S. interests and uphold a rules-based order. Whether it's about calling out Beijing's genocide in Xinjiang, its provocations on the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, or its coercion of sovereign states, the United States cannot be silent about the PRC's problematic behavior. The Biden administration deserves credit on this front. It has directly shared our disagreements with China while strengthening our diplomatic partnerships, whether by elevating the Quad, starting new initiatives like AUKUS, or elevating our relations with partners in ASEAN and the Pacific Islands through high-level summits and strategies. Third, it is critical that the United States remain the responsible player in this competition. We all know that what the PRC is going to do, but the world needs to know what the United States will play by the rules. That will remain open to cooperation with Beijing on areas of shared interest and global concern, and that we are trying to keep channels of communications open to ensure that this competition does not slide into conflict. Fourth, we need to recognize that war with China would be a policy failure of catastrophic proportions. It would cost countless American lives and devastate our economy. We must make clear that we do not seek war, and we will work to avoid it. However, we will continue to stand up to the PRC's aggression against our interests. And finally, we must not engage in a race to the bottom with the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to our values. I have been deeply troubled by the spike in anti-Asian violence spurred by the political rhetoric around COVID-19. I was similarly dismayed when one of our colleagues just last week questioned the loyalty of Congresswoman Judy Chu. There is no place for that in our democracy and in our debate. We should celebrate our diversity and safeguard our freedoms to present and clear contrast with the CCP. And what our committee does, it matters. It matters because both the country and the world are watching. And with that, I look forward to today's testimony. And I thank Chairman McCall, and I yield back the balance of my time.